The WWE have the most sensible, well-written storylines that are easy to follow, said nobody ever. From limos exploding, over-exploiting a well-loved wrestler's death, and an illegitimate son that actually turns out to be a leprechaun. Hang on, Cal, these stories make sense. Well, kind of. What about the ones that don't? Well, let's have a look at those. Here are 10 of the most confusing wrestling storylines that nobody understands. Number 10. HBK tags with God. As everybody knows, Vincent Kennedy McMahon invented sports entertainment and WrestleMania, created Hulkamania and the Attitude Era, defeated, destroyed, and then purchased his biggest rival and beat the US government when they came for him. What else? Oh yeah, the man beat God in a match at Backlash 2006. Yeah, I know. Embroiled in a feud with Shawn Michaels leading into WrestleMania 22, Mr. McMahon had the unholy hell beaten out of him by Mr. WrestleMania. The very next night on Raw, McMahon informed the born-again HBK that his victory had been an act of God and that it was just a coincidence, and because of that, God would be his tag team partner leading into the match at Backlash against Vince and Shane McMahon. On the night itself, God was represented in Michaels' corner by a spotlight heading to the ring. During the match, McMahon grabbed a mic and began trash-talking God in Michaels' corner. This was at the point where Jim Ross felt compelled to mutter, "Well, this is a little bit uncomfortable." Not nearly as uncomfortable as the boss dancing to Somebody Call My Mama, JR. Number 9. The Christmas Creature. Was it a Christmas tree that had come to life? A version of the Grinch? Who can truly say? One thing's for sure, it's the second most embarrassing thing that Glenn Jacobs has ever had to do. Just have a think about that for a second. Created in Memphis for the United States Wrestling Association, the Christmas Creature was inexplicably popular. I know, right? It's ridiculous. No one ever really explained who or what the Christmas Creature actually was, or why it was wrestling. It was like a rubbish festive version of the Gobbledygooker, second favourite character only to Mr. Blobby, but that's unrelated. Arriving late in 1992 specifically for a title versus mask match against Jerry the King Lawler, Lawler would tease the real identity of the creature prior to the match, hinting that he believed it was someone from the WWF underneath the mask come to take his title away. Nope, it was a rookie Kane. Yep, it was that exciting. Number 8. The Higher Power. In 1999, The Undertaker was knee-deep in his heel role as a satanic cult leader and began performing sacrificial rituals on people like Stephanie McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin. That was the catalyst, weirdly enough, to turn Steph's dear old daddy Vince babyface. Despite his actions for the last 18 months while feuding with Austin, for months The Undertaker had been muttering darkly about the mysterious higher power that he took orders from. Given the dead man's gimmick at the time, the implication that the higher power was the devil himself. Of course, wrestling history shows that the man behind the curtain was Vince McMahon. He'd orchestrated attacks on his family and upon himself. What? With the sole purpose of screwing his former nemesis, Stone Cold Steve Austin. No one could ever fully understand why McMahon believed that having his own daughter assaulted by a giant undead wizard would pursue Austin to come and save her. But WWE, yeah. Number 7. The greatest love trapezium ever. The horrible angle between Lana Rusev, Dolph Ziggler, and Summer Rae was a tantamount to a car crash for all concerned. No one could quite figure out who was supposed to be getting over who. Rusev, supposedly the big bad villain of the four of them, came off the most sympathetic. Both because the other three were clearly awful people, and because in real life he was the only one delivering the best promos of his life. He was so good in the role, he actually made Summer herself seem like a babyface by association. Of course, that was the problem. Because Rusev and Summer were supposed to be the antagonists, fans were horribly confused by the whole thing. I've confused myself just reading this. It took me a good couple of takes. Number 6. Overblown, overcrowded, and overbooked. WrestleMania 2000, the millennium of WrestleMania, was a nightmarish mess of event. Only one of the 9 matches on the card was a singles match, the scrappy cat fight between 2 non-wrestlers Terry Runnels and Stacey the Cat Carter. Even that one had a special guest referee, and nothing but outside interference in every one of the 3 minutes it lasted for. The main event was the final straw though. A 4-way elimination match for the WWF Championship was bad enough, but a McMahon in every corner? The fact that one of the participants was out of shape Mick Foley, appearing only 5 weeks after his retirement at No Way Out, was worse. The match was hard enough to follow on its own, but in the end Vince McMahon turned heel because it's Vince McMahon, of course he did, and he attacked The Rock with a chair, allowing Triple H to pin and close WrestleMania with a heel champion retaining the title. The WWF had successfully annoyed and confused their audience at the biggest pay-per-view of the year. Good job, guys. Good job. Number 5. When the boss tells you you're worthless. In spring last year, Stephanie informed John Cena that he wasn't a special little snowflake, and on the first Raw of this year, she told Roman Reigns that he was just the help. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the de facto heir to the throne, telling the world that the WWE's top star and the man that they're grooming to replace him are both interchangeable cogs in the WWE machine. If the 2 main event level babyfaces on the roster aren't important to the success of the company, what on earth are the fans supposed to think about the rest of the roster? So, why are we supposed to pay to see you perform? What's the point? But, looking back, Ravishing Rick Rude was cool though, wasn't he? And Rick Rude was his real name. Learning. Number 4, group hugs and screw jobs. I could list a couple dozen of WCW moments that made no sense, but in selecting one for this list, the prime example that I keep coming back to is a single appearance of the Yeti. Ugh, the Yeti. What on earth were they thinking? The theory is the Yeti was supposed to be Giant Gonzalez, aka George Gonzalez, a former basketball player with gigantism, but Gonzalez was taken ill and replaced in the role. But the bandages? I mean, everyone above the age of 3 knew that that wasn't a Yeti. Worse, before the creature staggered out to attack Hogan, Jimmy Hart had already swerved on him, knocked down the referee, and hit Hogan with a belt. When the Yeti came out, when the mummy came out to envelop him in a bear hug from behind, while Paul, the Giant White, aka The Big Show, did likewise from the front, making it look like some form of dodgy group yoga move. Hogan was accused of being behind Hart's attack of the referee, despite the fact Hart's swerve on Hogan indicated the opposite was true. Why was Hogan the only one disqualified when he was pretty much the only one that hadn't cheated? All questions that nobody had the answer to. Number 3, the circles that you find in the windmill of your mind. Yet another Hollywood Hulk Hogan storyline. This one from the WWF. While WWF champion in 1989, Hogan appeared in a terrible wrestling feature called No Holds Barred, in which he played a wrestler called Rip Thomas, feuding with his Monster Heel nemesis Zeus, played by actor Tom "Tiny" Lister. Lister appeared on the WWF program playing Zeus, complaining that Hogan had received top billing over him. So Lister's wrestling career was his character from the film, while Hogan's wrestling career was the actor in the film. Lister couldn't wrestle. Of course he couldn't. He was an actor, not a wrestler. Mind you, he couldn't act either. But that's okay, because Hogan couldn't act either. He was a wrestler, not an actor. But mind you, he couldn't wrestle either. But that's okay. Never mind. Number 2. Will the real leader of the Aces 8s please stand up? Essentially, TNA trying to replicate the NWO. Badly. This long, elaborate storyline across the whole of TNA's programming lasted from June 2012 to November 2013. A criminal motorcycle gang called Aces and Eights, wearing biker gear and masks, ooh, scary, would descend upon the TNA performers to ruin matches and administer beatdowns. The masks were a USP of this gimmick, the idea being that no one knew who or what was in the stable unless they could be unmasked. Unfortunately, the angle snowballed, much as the original NWO angle had, becoming very, very confusing. The angle became so cumbersome and clumsy that after 9 months, when the big reveal of the secret leader of the Aces 8s was finally revealed to be Bully Ray, it literally made no sense whatsoever. Brilliant. Number 1. Sting gets Hogan. One of the greatest wasted opportunities in wrestling history. Sting's build-up to bomb at WCW's biggest babyface star is sad, sad story. The NWO had been around for a while. The fans were dying to see the heels get taken out. A few knew that Sting was going to step up and take out Hogan, but the question was, when? Hollywood Hulk Hogan vs. Sting for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship at Starrcade 1997, WCW's equivalent of WrestleMania. The fierce babyface versus the veteran, with Sting going over clean. Instead, what we got was a dull, dull match. Hogan dominating the challenger with his 1980s offense until a clean pin came out of nowhere on Sting. At that point, temporary referee Bret the Hitman Hart turned up at ringside, thank God, claiming that there was a fast count and restarting the match, which Sting then won. The only problem was the count hadn't been fast. Hart had restarted the match for no good reason whatsoever, but thank God he did. Sting might have won the match, but everyone knew Hogan had won the war. Sting would never recover from the momentum that he'd lost. Did we miss any out? Why don't you put it in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.